Patrick, Greg, fantastic. Looks like we are all raring to go. Okay, today's so I'm going to warn you, not warn you, it's wrong to say I'm going to warn you. Today's session is going to be a lighter session. Okay, so we're basically going to cover a few things and we're going to have a bit of fun. We've got Kahoot, which we will do later on. We also have a little bit of a drawing test for you all. That's wrong to say, a drawing test. We'll go through that in a bit more detail when we get there, but it'll be useful if you're able to access a product like Paint, or you can draw on a piece of paper for later on. So I warn you that now. You can obviously sort that out when we have our break. You can reach for those particular tools. Okay, so today our lesson goals are really, we're going to talk about the difference between white and grey space. And I said I'd iron these things out because last week we spoke about red, yellow and green, didn't we? So we talked about those different areas that are in the data center. So we'll literally have a clear definition of what white and grey space is. We're going to explore the various rooms that are found in data centers. They are not all the same. We do basically allocate different rooms to different tasks to allow us to get some decent separation in there, to allow us to manage the core structures in a very efficient way. And we're going to gain some insights into the key considerations about effective data center design. And again, that's what I said. We are going to get you all to basically have a little play with drawing a data center. And we'll go through that when we get to that section. So let's kick off then. White space and grey space. As I said the other day, we talked about red, yellow and green spaces the other day that were about what is where in terms of safety and security. This is really about what lives in what space. So let's cover the white space first. So in your white space, you put things like your server rack. So this is all your long server racks, your aisles, and all the equipment, of course, that goes into that. So that covers things such as your media storage items, your servers, and other items along those sort of lines, as well as switches. You'll have how many? Let's have a show of hands to start with. Who's heard of a TOR, a top of rack switch before? Credo has. That's good, Daniel. I'm taking that as a thumbs up, Daniel, unless you just like hamsters. Is it a hamster or a squirrel? Victor, Christopher, George. So definitely. So things such as your top of rack switches and then the other switching you have in those racks is basically stored in those. So you kind of think about it as where all your compute storage is and all those forms of connections. It handles our network power distribution for the racks as well. So that is what we call white space. It can include air conditioning. So we tend to have AC units that basically pump air under the floors of our data centers. So that all again falls into essentially our white space. Good, Patrick. Thanks for reminding me we discussed TOR switches in a previous class. That's good. I'm glad I covered those. They are lovely toys. So grey space. So grey space is everything other than that. So it's your chillers, your UPS systems, your switch gear. Now remember, we need to decouple the top of rack switching. Yes, that is part of our switch gear. But normally within a data center, you will have a massive room that basically contains a whole load of switching gear, where all the cables and the infrastructure basically comes to that particular location. And from there, it will manage where your switches and your cables go from there. Covers your generators and transformers, of course, because we need to basically convert AC to DC and DC to AC. Remember, we did that in a previous class, didn't we? So white space is really where all the hard work is. It's where your compute power is. It's the key area of operations. And your grey space is basically all the bits and pieces that then support that particular structure. Now, has anyone got a question they'd like to ask about that form of definition? See a couple of you typing there. I'll give you a couple of seconds just to finish that typing. Golden ratio that we talked about in terms of the power wasn't it, Daniel? I think that was the one, wasn't it? The golden ratio between the power you basically provide for your actual compute space compared to the other pieces. Not so much here because we are really dealing with what goes into it rather than the amount of power that is drawn by each. Does that answer that question for you, Daniel? It does have a big bearing on it. But the golden ratio is really all about power, isn't it, rather than everything else. See a few of you just type in there, so I can't. Yinka will have a look at that at some other point, but not now. I think that's a not that it matters, but the lesson goals for 12 don't match the content. We'll have a little look at that offline. There are a lot of different ratios, such as the golden ratio and things like that, that are used in data centers that provide efficiency measures and things like that. We talked about it when we talked about power. We do have a little pieces with gray space and white space. Okay, Stefan. Stefan says basically he's having problems with his Thunder, messing with his power grid. Stay on as long as you can with this, that'll be beautiful. So we've got a quick discussion question here for you to poke into live chat. How does the division of physical space into white and grey space contribute to the overall efficiency and security of a data center? Greg says by splitting the two, you can keep the high-level equipment protected. And we go into a little bit more detail when we begin to break those spaces up into more detail on that, Greg. Yes, very much in that direction, isn't it? It encourages role-based access. Yes, definitely role-based access is an important thing. You know, we spoke about all the security stuff the other day, didn't we? And we will again go across some of that now. Bertrand basically backs that up, Yinka, and says prevents unauthorized access. Yes. See, Patrick's typing, so I'll let Patrick finish that one. Safer to have the more dangerous electrical equipment not accessible everywhere. Yeah, certainly everything that's super dangerous, like your high-powered electric systems, need to be somewhere else, don't they? So that's why we split them into rooms. And we're going to have a little chat in detail about what goes where. Sorry, Yinka, did you want to finish that typing or is it something else? Happy to hang around today because we've got lots of time. So the more questions you fancy asking today, the less filling I have to do. No, it's not true. So the more questions are good. Good for easier maintenance and organizations. Kenneth, I'm not looking. I'm looking exhausted. How rude of you. I've actually just come back from camping. If you're interested, so we've done 3 days camping, 3 nights under canvas. So I end up with a bit of a panda eye. Does anyone else kind of get that? Little panda eye, doesn't it? It's the sunglasses I wear. Great fun camping. Okay, so importance of access control in white and grey space. Like we said yesterday with the security entries and things such as that, we talked about how we control the security access to different areas. Now, we know we can control security through our biometrics, our fingerprints, irises, or facial recognition. We can do it with our friendly keycard system that gets us in and out. And we can use multi-factor authentication. So we can go that step further and basically insist for more than one identification method. one thing you will notice is that when you are walking around the data center, you will not normally be allowed to carry one of these. Most data centers ban you from taking mobile devices into the data center rooms. So although we talk about multi-factor authentication, that's going to be two or different methods. There's going to be two or different methods of it, not necessarily coming through your telephones. So most telephones are banned from the data center floor. See, Stefan's back. That's fantastic. And of course, we have our access logs that allows us to create an audit trail of who goes into what particular location. And that gives us an accountability by tracking entry. So both ways, also into white and grey space, but also in and out of rooms. And we can indeed nail that down to cabinet access if our cabinet access allows us to do that with an electronic lock rather than with a key lock or a number lock. That all depends on how big your security is for that particular data site. Now, we did mention earlier that also it allows us to do the separation of duties. Yeah, so data center technicians that are allowed access to the white space without actually letting them into grey space. So again, we can give them particular roles, we can give them duties and we can assign these to them. The white space is much more common for a data center technician to wander around, a NOC staff, for example, because they are basically going to be looking at the servers. They're going to be looking at the switches. They're going to be looking at the storage. You don't want them to be roaming to things such as your UPS systems or your main power areas, or indeed into your high-end network switching areas, because that's really where things are controlled by others within the company rather than just your data center technician. Kenneth here says, my buddy works in security in an Amazon data center. He sees exactly what people are accessing in real time when they go into rooms. Even shows if he hooks something up. Yeah, this is exactly what the data centers are there for. They're there basically to protect the systems, and that involves the security and audits. Like USBs or computers, definitely. 99, I'll be honest, 99% of servers that are actually placed into a data center rack have all the USB ports disabled. We do not like people putting USBs in because they are tiny. They are so easy to get through security, aren't they? So simple to get through. So why would we basically allow those? So everything tends to have things like the USB ports disabled because we like to do it via a network connection that is already established, so we can do it from remote locations. Good information there, Kenneth. So we said we run this separation of duties where we allow general data center staff into the white spaces, engineering and operation technicians get access to the grey spaces. Just another way of kind of splitting things up, isn't it? But of course, there are exceptions to every rule. This is what makes rules, isn't it? Is that there's an exception. While emergency and maintenance need may require a crossover, certainly if you have emergencies or you have particular maintenance that needs to happen, yes, you might well open up the white space to certain engineers that need to get access to certain systems. But there's normally a super efficient security protocol that's put in place to allow them. They're normally time windowed. So you get 1, 2 hour slots or 3 hour slots, depending on what's happened. You will normally end up doing, remember we said the 4-eye approach, where you basically have 2 people going around looking after things. So if there's emergency maintenance or things such as that, they will normally end up having 2 technicians wandering around together to allow that approval ratio to happen. And a lot of the time, these are explicit approvals that are needed. Now, some of the smaller data centers, you are going to find there's going to be a lot of crossover. So in a smaller data center, you are going to have people that are going to need access to both the grey and the white areas. Okay, but as the data center gets larger and larger, we tend to get more restricted about who can access what. Because you can imagine if you've got a data center that is simply run by about 8 people, most of those 8 people will need access and need to be able to check the generators. They'll need to be able to check the UPS rooms. They'll need to be able to go and do things on the server end as well, and with the local switches and with the wider network switches. So there is some crossovers between them. Anyone got any questions about that end of things? I know we covered a fair bit of security last week, didn't we? Kenneth, it sounds like your buddy is quite a good person to get hold of and chat to every now and again. I take it they get to see, Kenneth, I take it he gets to see the logs of who accesses which particular data rack. So which server rack's on there, wouldn't he? So you get a location of the room for pieces that have been accessed, as well as for jobs. And normally when you get a job, here's an example there on a ticketing system. If you're a NOC engineer and you get allocated a job, your job will have the room, the rack location, so the rack ID, and it'll even have the U number that system is supposed to be in, that you are supposed to allocate, as well as a serial number that you can then tie it all up with. And this all prevents issues, prevents basically things going wrong. I remember at DEMARC, they actually have a really tiny printer system that when you get a ticket, because no one's going to remember all those details, no one's going to remember the serial number. You're not allowed to take a phone in, so you can't snapshot it or read it off of a phone. So they literally had a tiny ticketing system that when you had a job, you said, okay, print that, and it would print a tiny slip of paper that gave you the room, the rack number, and indeed the U that it was on, and the serial number of the device. And you physically carried that round with you and then put it in the bin afterwards. Okay, so you physically take that round. Yeah, and as Kenneth points out, it's all about security. They're timed log. So you get a time log depending on how long you are in a particular room. To be honest, most data centers know how long it's going to take you to swap out a disk drive, how long it's going to take you to make a new connection for a server connection. So repatching the server into a different port on our top of rack switch. So they know roughly how long it's going to take. If it takes longer than that, well, hold on, why is it taking longer? And should we be looking at that? So it is all about security. Any further questions about that small section? Then we'll move on to the next one, I think, isn't it? Now, within your data center, I know Amazon might be separate in the way that it manages its data centers because they tend just to be all Amazon. You can have things such as co-location. So co-location is where literally a data center will provide the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure. They'll provide the racks, they'll provide the hot aisle and the cold aisle, the air conditioning, the electricity. And what you may buy is you may buy an entire rack. So you may buy an entire rack that only you have access to. And they'll give you a top of rack switch in and they'll say you can plug your systems into the top of rack switch. And that is your co-location. Now you can rent smaller, you can actually rent down to half racks or indeed down to units, depending on the data center provider that you go to. So that of course means that potentially your kit lives in the same racks with someone else's hardware. Okay, and that is co-location to the extreme, but you have to go careful there because of course every time that anyone gets access to that system, they can of course physically touch both devices. So it tends not to be done. Nowadays, most co-location, you'll buy an entire rack and you'll rent that. And that gives you the key and the access code just to that rack, and it's only you that will be able to do it. Now, of course, depending on your contract and how that works, you may have a contract that simply says the data center technicians will never touch your kit. And that means you have to send an engineer around with his passport, ID, with a valid entry and a valid exit time, an estimated time of arrival and what they're going to be doing, to validate that particular person to come in and do the other things. Or you can purchase what's known as a remote hands-on. Now that is where you simply pay a NOC engineer from the data center to go and do particular tasks for you. Now these tickets are quite entertaining because these tickets have to be very precisely written. Because what the data center and that NOC engineer doesn't want to have is some vagaries in there that says go and change the disk drive on this particular server, and there's obviously a 24 bank disk drive. So it's got to be precise and it's got to be written correctly with no ambiguity. It's the ambiguity that kills data center NOC staff. Because if they are totally unsure, they will simply throw the ticket back. And that again wastes time, doesn't it? And that's not where we want to be. I can see Kenneth typing away there. Is that a question, Boubacar? I think we noticed that you've got your hand up. Or have you accidentally just pressed the right button for that in the Zoom meeting? I do it all the time. Well, I can't hear anything. I'm just going to type a message. Let's see if they come back to us. Okay, let's carry on then. So, like we said, with co-location, it can be in the same cabinet cages, but we need to ensure that there is some physical separation that ensures customer equipment remains isolated from that and other tenants. This is obviously part of the reason that you are not allowed to take a phone round, because if you're allowed to take a phone round, you could take pictures in particular racks and you could get details because you get the serial numbers, the model numbers, you'll see what kit they've got. We don't want that happening. We don't want anyone seeing anyone else's kit. We had not an incident at IMARC. When I was producing some training material for them, producing some training videos, we actually had a guy, like a professional photographer, come in with a beautifully mounted video camera, etc., to take some fantastic motion shots through the racks and things like that. And we had a specific area where we weren't allowed to go because it was customer equipment. Everywhere else we could kind of manage and we could fade it out, but yeah, that area, not a chance you were going to get in with a camera. And if I can see you posted a video, I'm not going to watch it myself. Thank you very much, Kenneth. Okay, so that's white space. Okay, physical separation is important, and you are literally purchasing cages or cabinets or particular areas of the data center. Within the data center as well, there are shared amenities. Yes, there are areas that multiple people from different companies will actually access. Typical one is going to be the conference room. Simply for meeting and greeting people. You can have good old chats, traditional stuff in those. And we have staging areas. That's where we prepare and test equipment before deploying it. So there will normally be a room with a big table that you gain access to. You can bring your HP server in, stick it on the desk. You can plug it into an internet connection that's provided and some power. You can configure it, play with it, make sure it's all good. And then you can hand it either to a NOC engineer and do remote hands. So you give it to them and say, this needs to go into this particular U and this particular rack with these particular connections. Or depending on the data center and the security that they run, you may be able to wander around normally with another NOC engineer. So you'll have someone essentially watching you, not quite holding your hand, but coming with you all the way around to make sure that you are only accessing the areas that you should be accessing. And that's a good way to do it, because there's no way that a lot of people will actually find their way around a lot of data centers. Certainly if they're large, it'd be like walking around a maze. It did actually take me probably 2 months to work my way around the data center at IMR and actually work out where all the rooms were and the different locations for different racks. It was very much fun. Any questions about those particular co-locations then? Has anyone experienced co-location and worked with co-location before? I can see Yinka typing some messages there. Let's see what she says. Was that at an Amazon data center or was that somewhere else? Kenneth says, one day I know why I will. Well, good luck on that, Kenneth. We'll keep our fingers crossed for you. Victor said, I saw a co-location data center at Ascena Retail. Equinix data center. Well, you will find. Okay, let's have this little conversation now. Let's see. Who knows what SaaS is? SaaS. Please feel free to type it into the live chat. I feel now we're talking about data centers. This kind of clears up co-location a bit for it, doesn't it? Software as a service. Fantastic. Well, Yinka wins fastest fingers first. Stefan, William in there. Joshua, we need to behave. So SaaS is software as a service. Okay, so you don't have your own equipment. You tend to basically purchase a piece of software from someone else. It's like Microsoft 365. Okay, I don't care about the hardware they're running. I'm not interested. I'm literally just doing software as a service. Okay, then step down from that is PaaS, which is PaaS. Who knows what PaaS is then? Kenneth, yeah, Dropbox and Zoom as well. Yes, very much a SaaS, aren't they? William, fastest fingers there. Platform as a service. Now, platform as a service, they run the hardware and they run, excuse me, and they run the operating system, essentially giving you a framework, and you run the software. So it's great for developers because they don't care about the hardware. They don't want to know. They don't care about the operating system. They just want to develop their whizzy app on it. So that's platform as a service. Azure does run a bit of platform as a service, yeah. So that's a similar way. You kind of click a button, you go, well, give me a Windows server. Thank you very much. I don't care what it's running on. I just want to run my platform. And then a step further down that is IaaS. Let's see who's got fastest fingers now then. IT as a service. Ooh. No bananas there, Stefan. Victor nails it. Infrastructure as a service. Daniel in there as well. Kenneth, well done. So that's infrastructure as a service. So infrastructure as a service, you're really going to them and you're saying, what I want is I want this processor. So I want this many, I want this particular processor. I want this much memory. I want this much disk space. And that then means you are purchasing the infrastructure. And they hand it to you and they go, put whatever software you want it. You have to load the operating system on it. You have to load any applications on it. You have to configure it yourself. They're simply going, here is essentially what we used to call bare metal. So it's a bare metal service. Here it is. And then, of course, the step further down from that is where we talk co-location, where you physically bring your own hardware and you put it into a rack. So those are kind of the 4 different stages that you'll see in a co-location service. Anyone got any questions about that particular co-location? Oh, we're all pretty good with that. Fantastic. I can see Yinka typing there. Yeah, data as a service is one of those in there as well that is kind of allowable now. It's kind of creeping in. It used to basically be considered PaaS. But yeah, now it's much more data center as a service because we are dealing with large language models nowadays. So data is key, man. The amount of stuff you have on a large language model and large database centers. Yes, you don't want to know about the data center. You don't want to know about SQL. You don't know if they're running MySQL or Microsoft SQL or one of the other free SQLs, or indeed running a open database, so a non-SQL or something like NoSQL or something along those lines. So we don't want to know about it. Bertrand, they tend to give you the structure and you chuck whatever data you like on it. Something like the Amazon S3, I believe, is a non-relational database. Oh, I don't feel I should drift into relational databases. It's probably not due for this, but hey, we've got a bit of time today, haven't we? Or do I dare? Yeah, we've got a couple of minutes here, haven't we? So who knows what the difference is between a relational database and a non-relational database? Or who'd gonna say who'd like me to explain it to? I think I'm gonna explain anyway. It's not based on security, Greg. Good guess though. I like the idea. Oh, Derek's kind of got their relational database is sort of tables. It's one way to look at it. Tables with relations to other tables. There you go. So George basically nails the definition a bit better there, but that's certainly some good answers there. So what a relational database is, something like SQL, is you have a set of tables. Think of it, simple ways, think of it as lots of Excel spreadsheets. But within those spreadsheets, each table has a relation to another table. So for example, if we're dealing with addresses, you would have lots of names in one list and then lots of addresses in another, and you'd have a relation between a name and an address. So each name would have a relational part of an address. Maybe two people live at the same address. Yep, still you've got the same relation. So that's a relational where they kind of trunk into each other. And that is fantastic for regular data stuff. And then you have a non-relational database. Now, a non-relational database is quite often described as buckets. Okay, they are buckets. You just chuck loads of stuff into it, don't necessarily have relations to each other. This tends to be used for things like graphics, and that's a typical Amazon S3 is a bucket. You just chuck loads and loads of pictures into it, and then your system pulls those pictures out and displays them on a web page. So the individual pictures don't have any relation to each other or any other table. They are just buckets of data. Yinka, yes, non-relational is NoSQL. There's no real standard query language that's used. Hence, NoSQL. Is that kind of clear for everyone? Let's see a thumbs up if you understood that, shall we? And a thumbs down if you didn't quite get it. It's not important for this particular lecture, but it's always interesting to talk about it if we've got some time. Christopher's got it. George, Stefan, Louise, Inka, Patrick. As I say, today we've got some time, so if you want to ask some other questions, we can obviously fit those in, but we'll see how we go, shall we? I'm going to say we've got some time, then I'm going to burn up so much and we rush at the end. B. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so that's kind of co-location and what co-location is about. I'll go through the review because we can do that. So within our now defined white and grey, we have designated rooms. And this is where we kind of really get into the nitty-gritty of it all and we begin to break things up. So this helps us because physical locations of the rooms is really important. Okay, the distances between particular rooms that are key for a data center is massively important because this is the time that it takes for certain things to happen. Obviously, data traveling backwards and forwards is quick, but if they're next to each other, then they're really quick. Cable runs cost money. So if areas that need lots and lots of cables are far away from each other, all of a sudden you've got long cable runs, which cost loads and loads of money. So we kind of give these different names, okay? And the idea of building your data center is to design it so that you are able to access everything as well as get data from A to B with a minimum cost involved in that. So let's have a quick glance at some of these areas. So these are the areas that they define it up into. You have a core infrastructure room, which essentially is your mechanical, electrical room and your generator yard. Well, what data centers in the picture? I'm not even sure it is a data center. Data centers very rarely have that much glass around them. I'm going for not a data center. I'm going to call the bluff on that one. It's a call center. Yeah. Bertrand, probably more than likely, no one else puts that much glass on a system. With data centers, remember what we like about data centers? We like to keep them cold, don't we? So we like to keep the sunlight out. Definitely we like to keep the sunlight out. And we like to keep prying eyes out. No way would we have it anywhere in a data center that a third party could look in through the window. That would just be a big no-no, wouldn't it? Greg, data centers look more like prisons. Okay. So let's carry on with the data center designs. Okay, so we have a core infrastructure, which is your mechanical electrical room. Okay, and it's your generator yard. That is what we call core infrastructure rooms. Notice all these are going to be plural. Yes, you can have multiple core infrastructure rooms without any problems. Indeed, your generator yard will be outside more likely than inside. Okay, so you'll probably have a mechanical room where all the electrics come in. You have your big switching systems in there. And then you have a generator yard that's outside. You may have two generator yards. You may have two electrical rooms. We have a network and telecoms room. Okay, so the network room can be separate. There can be plenty of them. They have what's known as a network room, a demarcation point, and we'll go into these in a bit of details, a main distribution frame, an MDF. We love our acronyms, don't we? And an intermediate distribution frame, an IDF. And then we have a POP, a point of presence. It's not the mail server. It's not a POP3 server or anything like that. It's a point of presence. It's likely to be in our network rooms. Then we have our server and equipment room. Okay, that's the data hall. That is as we said, that is our white space. Definitely a server and equipment room. I can see William typing there. What have we got, William? Give William another couple of seconds to finish typing his message. God, it was a long one. Thank you, William. In my warehouse, we had to clean IDF cabinets. And I was able to see how the MDF, love the acronyms you're throwing in there, but we got them up there, so that's okay. IDF, and we were able to see how the MDF connects to IDFs with fiber and IDFs to workstations and APs. There you go. Access points, well done. Well, thank you very much, William. So it can get quite exciting when you're basically dealing with the network and telecoms room. It is fantastic mess of cables and wires, but it is great fun. So we talked about the server and equipment rooms. Okay, again, that's the data hall and server room. Basically have the same meaning. They are basically where our aisles are with our racks and our data centers. And those are the big white areas, aren't they? And then we have what's known as the support and auxiliary room. We're going to go into, it's interesting. Have a think about what you think a meet me room is. Think about it, and then we will tell you actually what it is. We have a screening room and a loading dock and staging spaces. See a couple of you typing there, so we'll give them a chance. Derek and Patrick are coming through. Yeah, this is where we go, Derek. Yep. You're not quite right, but we're going to discuss it in detail. So it's just kind of funny because it's probably one of the rooms that is given a name that least actually represents exactly what it is. It is really weird. Nothing to do with what you think it might be. So there's a little discussion question we'll drop into. So why is it essential for data center designs to consider the purpose of each designated room, such as MMRs, the meet me room, mechanical electrical room, and network rooms? Why do you think it's important? Organization? Yeah, it is organization. Why do you think it's important to work out where we locate these locations? Devon says their budget and purpose, yeah. Limited access to critical data. Fireproof emergency exit points. Thank you, Frido. Joshua came up with a limited access and critical data, yes. Patrick kind of nails most of it there. Bad layout requires more cabling than necessary. Again, it's all about the efficiency and the cost, isn't it? If I basically have some diesel generators, I probably want to put my electrical room fairly close to the diesel generators, but not too close in case I get a fire in a diesel generator that blows the whole thing up. So it's all about that, isn't it? You want it fairly close because that's the main point of entry. It will come in from the diesel generators straight into essentially an electrical room or mechanical room. I don't want it to have to run 200 yards underneath the floor around to the back end where my electrical room is, do I? Bertrand says there, separation of duty and security. Yes. We don't want people to have to walk through an electrical generator room to get to the main data floors, do we? So it's all about considering what goes where and how best is required for access, security, and emergencies. As well as keeping everything cheap. It's all about the money in the end, isn't it? So we're going to talk about these for a little bit to give you some more details on those. Okay. Obviously, you can feel free to read these as well. So the purpose of your electrical room is literally, it's your electrical and mechanical room. It is where you have all your electrical switches. Okay, all the automatic switching that happens if you need to go onto UPS. And as you can see, these are actually power cables. Gosh, cracking, isn't it? Okay, its location is typically located to the central point with optimal access to other key areas of the data center. Okay, such as server room and networks. If your key core infrastructure room is basically located on the left-hand side, you've got billions of cables that will have to go all the way across a long building. If you've got a 200-meter building, you've got 200 meters of cables. If you put it in the middle, no location is further than 100 meters away. It's all about thinking about things like that. So it's typically located in a central position. I've never seen one located in the middle, square in the middle of a data center. My experience is they're normally around the edge, but middle edge rather than right out on the edge. So again, this is basically designed strict, stringent requirements for redundancy, fault tolerance, maintenance, okay, to ensure the continuous uninterrupted operation. So you've got to bear in mind, this is going to be one of your grey areas, and this is where engineers and people are going to have to get access to. So you don't want them to have to walk through a data center or one of your data halls to get to this particular location. due to the nature of it, okay, the mechanical route is heavily restricted. Okay, there are strict security measures because it is core. If someone was to try and knock out a data center, yeah, that would be a perfect place to go. You essentially take out one room, take it all offline, and then all that data center dies. Part of that is your generator yard. So we know the generator is basically there to provide backup power. The generator is normally located outside. Sensible, it's a diesel engine that's going to be running. They are normally in close proximity to the mechanical electrical room, okay, because they need to feed directly to it, isn't it? So the strategic placement allows for efficient routing of power cables. Now, who remembers the N+1 and 2N redundancy configurations that we spoke about when we spoke about diesel generators? I can ask a little question here, couldn't I? Don't know if I feel mean enough to do it. Yes, go on, let's do it, Dave. Extra generators for full power. Let's a very quick quiz on here. If my data center requires 4 generators, diesel generators, when there's a requirement for it, how many generators do I need to purchase if I'm running an N+1 configuration? 5. Look at that. It's like you've all paid attention to some of the lectures we've given. Well done, well done. What about a 2N configuration? Fastest fingers first. Christopher, did you see the question coming, or did I telegraph that one to you? Well done, Stefan, Dylan, Patrick, Bredo. Brilliant. Okay, that's great. So as you see, the designs are like that, so that they are able to do it. Of course, if you're running a 2N configuration for your diesel generators, why not put them in separate locations? They don't all have to physically be next to each other. Sometimes they are. But if you're running 2N, the whole idea is if one entire set goes down, you've still got a set running. So 2Ns are normally totally separate locations for those generators. They're not next to each other. They are totally separate locations in that building design. But again, you've got to consider that both locations need to be fairly close to your main engineering electrical room. Good stuff. Any questions about the diesel generators and the electrical room? So the core infrastructure, essentially. Good stuff. Okay, we'll tick on then. So then we have our network room. Okay, the network room is basically a dedicated space within a data center that literally contains all those beautiful network toys. These are all the Cisco, what are they called? Cisco, I forgot what they're called now. I know they're called routers and switches. I was trying to remember the exact Cisco models I was playing with. ASAs, weren't they? Cisco ASAs and different models like that. So it is basically where the IT infrastructure and components provide connectivity to external networks like the internet and the wide area networks. Okay. And there's not normally one room, there's normally several rooms. But the point of some of the network rooms is it allows you to have a centralized location, and they will be separate. And we will talk about that in a minute when we talk about demarcation. So they're typically located close to a server room or data hall, optimizing cable routing. Yes, that again probably puts it more in the center because you're not likely just to have one data hall. You're likely to have many data halls. Again, so this item is normally located within close proximity of these. Now remember the key features to include redundancy, cooling environment, control structure, and cabling and physical security. We don't want someone to come into our telecoms room with a big axe and wreck our lives, do we? In terms of access for that particular room, yes, they are heavily restricted. Authorized personnel only normally is allowed in there. So network engineers, technicians, and operations staff, heavily restricted. Now, we know a lot of these basically use fiber cables, and we can get indeed high density fiber cables nowadays, which are a big bundle of fibers, multiple fiber rooms that allow us to run a single cable to allow multiple network connections. And part of the benefit of this is because we simply can run faster connections for those distances. Although the distances aren't massive, it's important we can run fast connections between those items. Within this network infrastructure that we're talking about, we have what's known as a demarcation point. So the demarcation point is a telecom service provider's network connections with the data center infrastructure. Okay, it allows external technicians and troubleshoot issues from outside the secure space. So the big purpose is it establishes a boundary between essentially what your service provider is, your ISP, so those guys, and the data center infrastructure. That means essentially we've got a very nice, neat handoff point. Anything that's going wrong up to here, well, that's my fault and I'll look after it. Anything that goes wrong from there onwards, well, that's my ISP and he comes in and fixes that piece. For obvious reasons, they're located near the network room and telecoms for efficient interconnectivity, yeah. And they're normally designed with clear separation between service providers and data center equipment, because you will not just have one service provider. No data center now will just go to a single supplier, single ISP and go, I just want to run your lines. No, they will have multiple service providers in there, depending on what country you're in, depends on what that is. Because then if one service provider gets hit or has faults or damaged or anything like that, you've still got essentially another line that is working and keeping your systems up and running, keeping you sweet. Whenever we think redundancy and redundancy is always there. Now, a lot of data centers, the bigger data centers, will actually have two demarcation points. Anyone think why we'd have two demarcation points? Patrick's asked a very good question. Does each ISP get their own demarcation room? Normally, you wouldn't have their own individual demarcation room, but it might be they have half-height cabinets allocated to each ISP. So you can have half-height cabinets that are specially locked that contains, say, UK, we're going to give an example, contains a BT system and another half-height cabinet that contains a Virgin system. Okay, so they might well have their own lockable facilities within that demarcation room. George is answering that question. Yeah, redundancy. That's why we might well have two demarcation rooms. I know the first time I came across the thought of this form of redundancy, I was working for a company and we simply looked at the company and what was surrounding us. And we discovered that there was obviously a lot of roadworks were happening in that particular area. It was in Windsor. So I basically selected to have a diversely routed cabling structure. Now that basically meant that I had two separate ISPs. I ran one set of cable down essentially the west side of the building and one set of cable down the east side of the building. Two separate ISPs. They then went separate directions on the road infrastructure. Two totally different cabinets. Okay, so there was no crossover. So I didn't have to worry so much if my man in the digger outside, who was digging up the road at the time, went through one cable, because I still had one that was still working. So it's redundancy, redundancy, and redundancy is really what we're after. So you might indeed find two demarcation rooms, simply to allow the cables to go out separate directions. Yeah, definitely your fall over, Yinka. Well done. No reason you can't run them both at the same time, actually. You're paying for both, you might as well use them both at the same time. And then one will kick over to the other one if it dies. So the image here that we're seeing is the main distribution framework, the MDF. And you can probably see in here, they haven't labeled it very nicely for us, but essentially your demarcation location is going to be 7 is the ISP line coming in, 6 is the demarcation, 5 I think is designed to be the data center network cabinets. But then you have 3 and 3, so you have 2 locations of both the brown boxes, essentially are the small network separations. So these would be considered to be the intermediate distribution frameworks, the 2 brown boxes, because these are the ones that distribute just to the local systems along these rings. So the big difference between the main distribution framework is that it tends to be a central termination point for all incoming telephone communication. Telecoms, that means your ISP lines as well, and WANs, and it tends to basically be pulled into a separate location. It's normally situated near the demarcation room, obvious reasons, because that's where the ISP stuff comes in, then hits the main distribution framework, and then is routed off to the intermediate distributed framework. So you kind of had like your little spider's web coming out. So the main distribution framework is, as I said, normally close to the network room and the DEMARC for efficient cable routing. But your intermediate distributed framework is distributed throughout the facility. So it's normally, one in each data room to optimize cable centers. That could be separate from it, or it could be in the same room. Depends on how your data center gets designed. And they're just finishing off the network and telecommunications rooms. I think we'll probably go for a 15-minute break after we've had this piece. So it is our point of presence, our POP location. So this really houses the network equipment belonging to the telecoms provider, our ISPs, essentially within our demarcation area. So it enables interconnectivity with data and the center's infrastructure. Obvious reasons it's located near the demarcation room and near our main distribution framework. And this is where we might have co-location in there as well. Because when we have our co-location, for example, if I'm just basically paying for infrastructure as a framework, or I'm basically just paying for rack space, then it's possible that I might actually agree with an ISP about my own connection. I may not want to run on your connection. I may just want to use your facility for your electricity and your air conditioning. Okay, so it's possible that I might well have co-location and basically put some of my kit in there that connect through to my own ISP. Yeah, Yinka's kind of asked, briefly highlight what type of equipment is commonly found in the MDF and IDFs. They are normally big switching gears, if I'm honest with you. These are the ASA 500s, so your Cisco routers and switches. Certainly the MDF will have the bigger kits, and these will be multiple switches that are more than capable of handling 240 network connections, I believe. It's that sort of direction. Whereas your IDF, your smaller items, will just contain smaller items in there. So they will literally contain things such as your 24-port racks, switches, 24, 48 ports that come from the individual rooms themselves. So your data center, imagine your data center floor has its all top of rack switches. All those top of rack switches will end up connecting through to an IDF. Okay, so your intermediate distribution framework. And then the intermediate distribution framework will whiz round to the MDF if it is a large enough data center. Yes, that's fair enough. Patrick, that's a good comment. So MDF is more for central routing for your own data centers kit, whereas a POP is more co-location, where you plug your own kit in. And the reason they're separated is because you wouldn't want someone who's co-locating coming in and getting access to anything that is vaguely your kit. So anything that's vaguely the data center's system. Because it only takes you unplugging a couple of cables to cause total havoc in some areas. Any more questions about the network and telecom communications room before we have a 15-minute break? Sounds great. Let's pop off for a quick 15-minute break then. You can get a pancake, a comfort break, or a banana. Don't know who can cook a pancake in 15 minutes. Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a chance to have a comfort break or get a coffee and apple. We're going to continue on with our designated rooms discussion. Okay, let's start off with a set of thumbs for everyone that can see the server and equipment room. George, fastest fingers. Well done, Daniel, in there. Bon appetit. Thank you very much, Daniel. Daniel Westmore, Daniel Collins, Mindy, Teng, Marina, Dylan. Fantastic. Patrick. Okay, so we're all looking like we're ready to go then. So the data hall, server room. Oh, it's a really boring description, but it's where an awful lot of the stuff basically happens. We know what we put into these rooms. We put our servers, we put data centers, well, not data centers, we put storage, we put network components, we have a top of rack switch on the top of these in general. Okay, and the idea is really just, these are going to be our cool centers. These are going to be the ones that have our cool aisle and our hot aisle. The main location of these is an easy access to supporting infrastructure like our network rooms, like our mechanical and electrical rooms, and our cooling system. Remember, air conditioning is key for these particular rooms specifically because this is where all our heat is getting generated. So they tend to have raised floor, so we can get access to it. A lot of them do have drop ceilings as well, so we can run cabling across the ceilings. That's not so popular. I much prefer everything to go along the floor because that way less chance of anything getting damaged. The cooling system, yes, gets blown underneath. And access is really, the access is really strictly controlled because this is where the data is for everything, and data is king. So it's limited. This is where your NOC members of staff will be wandering around and accessing and controlling and changing bits of hardware. Don't know what he's doing sat on a desk with it. We've never had a desk in any of the data rooms that we basically had. So that's kind of a quick summary of what we have in there. Yes, it's a really quick summary, but remember, these are the key rooms that contain all our servers. This is what we are making money for. This is why we have data centers, is for these particular rooms. Everything else tends to sit around the outside and support them. So do not forget these rooms. Then we have our MMR, our Meet Me room. I said it was quite interesting. Falls under the support and auxiliary room. It's basically a dedicated space in the data center where various telecommunications carriers, so your ISP, network operators, and physical interconnect and exchange data traffic. Okay, it's kind of a bit weird because that sounds pretty much like a demarcation room. Yeah, we kind of covered that in networks. This one is a specific and MMR room. These are located near to our network rooms, near demarcation points. Okay, and near points of presence rooms. Okay, they tend to interconnect all these things going outwards. It's designed to be a neutral space Okay, providing equal access to basically all participants that are basically taking part in there. They said it will also include their carrier room traffic. So we'll have their carrier room equipment for the individual ISPs. And we do like to have this separate because we like to reduce the risk by keeping the carrier stuff outside of essentially what we consider to be a client space. So you have in this diagram here on the left-hand side, we have our LAN in our data center. Then we have like an AWS designated connection port. Then we have some routing tables, VPC1, VPC2, that's virtual private connections. And that is our MMR, which basically has our AWS designated connection points. I said it'd be nothing like what you expect here. An MMR, meet me room, it's where we all shake hands with people. No, definitely not. What we have for shaking hands with people is we have a screening room. Okay, this essentially is a room where it's very secure, and the idea is we group meet and greet incoming personnel and equipment and deliveries. They're inspected and screened. So this is all our lovely magic wand they wave around you to check what you're carrying. Look inside the kit and the toolboxes that they bring on if they're bringing on stuff on site. The real purpose of it is a physical security point in the data center. So you've got to pass through this before you then get access into any of the relevant secure data areas. It's normally near the main reception point. Well, obviously we don't want to drag them around the data center. So come into reception, sign yourself in, go basically to the screening room where everything is checked out. Access to screening rooms tends to be, it's limited, it's authorized people, but we know it's going to be external people as well as internal people. So it's visitors ongoing a particular piece of screening. We may well have things such as, tell you, my brain's gone a little bit today, hasn't it? Have things such as the X-ray machines. That's what I was after. God, bloody. The X-ray machines that we basically see at airport securities and things similar to that. See, Patrick's probably typing something a little bit cheeky in there. We'll hold for Patrick, shall we? The definition between them is really close, Patrick. Patrick's asked, what would be the distinction between the MMR and something like the DEMARC and the POP? A lot of it's all to do with what particular pieces of equipment and who owns those equipment, and indeed how your data center wants to run itself. So an MMR might be for third parties. So I may well have organized something, and therefore I would have a presence in the MMR for my equipment. Whereas something like a DEMARC and a POP will basically be for the data center's communication pieces. So it can vary, and there is I appreciate there is a little bit of a blurred line between some of those. That answer that for you, Patrick? Great. And then, of course, we have the loading and staging spaces. So this is where we are bringing in large pieces of equipment rather than just an individual coming in with a suitcase or with a single-use service tucked under his arm. If we are importing and bringing lots of different equipment in, including the racks, so the physical hardware as well as things such as your larger used systems, larger used servers, then yes, this is basically where we would load those in. Okay, they're designed for basically heavy equipment. They're typically located near the main entrance point because we don't want them driving around in circles. So we can get personnel in there. And as I say, they're capable of handling large, heavy items. Tends to be a warehouse size entrance, such as you bring up a lorry to. Now we know full well we're going to get a variety of people in there, but it's going to be strictly controlled with limited personal access. Okay, it's going to be only authorized vehicles, only authorized staff, and data center staff will be allowed there. But it's obviously not as tight and as stringent as when you walk into one of our red zones. Any questions about the support and auxiliary rooms? Good stuff. Now, I said when we started that you might need access, or you will need access to something like paint or draw, or a item you can basically draw on. Feel free to do it on a pad and a piece of paper if you need to. Because what we want you to do is we want you to design a simple data center layout. So we can apply our location of the knowledge of these locations and where they need to be related to everything else. So what we want you to do is design one simple data center. It doesn't have to be horribly complicated. And we're going to give you 15 minutes to do this, maybe a little bit longer, but we'll target it at 15 minutes. And we want you to basically include at least one of each of these items. Now, for each room space, we want you to provide a brief description. We are talking some really brief descriptions here, okay? So brief descriptions. Now, I mentioned paint because probably I might just chuck it into paint. So you can do it very nicely in paint. And for a quick example, we might want to use a particular shape, grab a shape, and I can draw my data center room. And I might say, this is where I want in red. I might then go, well, this is going to be my power. Okay, and we can put items in there. Or you can use anything else. Like I said, you can basically do it with a good old-fashioned piece of paper and simply sketch it on that if you want. And we're going to give you 15 minutes. So that's 6:44. I'm going to come back and you can post these on live chat. I'm going to still be around, so you can post things onto live chat and we can still have a chat. Or if you want and you feel brave enough, you can happily unmute your microphone and we can have a good little conversation about it if you want. And we'll give you 15 minutes, as I said, to design that. I'll leave this on the screen so you can keep an eye on it. Any questions about what I've asked you to do there? Or do you think will be good? Thumbs up if you've already started drawing. Great stuff. As I said, any questions, please poke them in live chat or unmute yourself and we can have a good little conversation about it. Sonny, what would you like to talk about a bit more then? Very happy just to have a conversation, or you can type something into the live chat if you have a particular questions. In this exercise, bear in mind there is no right or wrong answer in terms of what you draw. I mean, that's okay. It's not a case of doing anything perfectly. It's just a case of drawing a nice little room and working out where you'd put something like a generator room, where you'd put a network room. Well, there's no right or wrong answer. Very much, Patrick. Patrick says, I think it's very much a let's see what we come up with exercise. Yeah, Sunny, something similar to that would be fine. So that sort of thing, put rooms in there. So remember, you've got to have a electrical room, a gen yard, network room, demarcation point. Perfect. Anything like that. I love the paper. Thank you. There's no bonus points for being super professional, but think about where you would actually locate things in your data center. We're about halfway through the task now. So no need to rush it. Greg, how long did it take you to type that in? Fantastic fun. Entrance lobby security. Data halls, cooling units, backup utilities. Patrick appreciates your work as well there. Many rooms as you like. The rooms, Sunny, are basically on that list there. So ideally you want to have a mechanical room, which is where your electric comes in, a generator yard, which we know needs to be close to that, a network room, which can consist of a demarcation point, a main distribution frame, as well as potentially a POP and an MMR, meet me room, and stick some data halls in, screening room and a loading and docking bay. So many rooms as you fancy, really. You can either knock yourself out or just put one of each in. Well, we've got first entry in. We will not worry about chatting about it straight away. Well, I can definitely see I'm going to need to make my screen a bit bigger, aren't I? Yeah, a couple of minutes left, people. Okay. Now bringing that to close, as I said, it's not. If you want to make some submissions, that's fantastic. No one's going to criticize anything that anyone's done here. Remember, this is all just about having a bit of a think about where you would put things and what are required and the requirements here. And we'll just pick a couple and we'll just have a little chat over a few of them. Give you a minute or so just to submit them, and we'll see how crazy live chat goes. I'll turn my head sideways because Frida's put it in that way. Okay, I mean, Sonny, what you submitted looks grand. EL, I think, is your electric. Good stuff. Well, we're getting a few in here now, so that's pretty good. So we're gonna have a little chat through, not really to discuss a few, really. Oh, that's a beautiful one there. The Inca's done some fantastic drawing there. Victor's got a good one in there. As I say, the main exercise of this is just to have a bit of a think about what you're basically doing with it, isn't it? I'm gonna pick one out. Let's pick Patrick's. Okay, remember there's no wrong or right answer on any of these. I'm just basically going to slide Patrick's in here so we can have a little look at it. So as you see with Patrick's here, we've got the generator yard outside, which is fantastic. We've got some electrical units, which is our mechanical and electrical thing. We've got a loading bay. And we've got our networking center here, haven't we? With our POP, our main distribution framework, and our MMR meet me room, and our demarcation point. Fantastic. And then literally across the corridor, he's got 2 data centers. Beautiful. Remember, data centers are key. That's where we make our money. So more data center space, data halls, then the better, okay? He's got loading, he's got security, we've got screening. So security and screening are next to each other. Fantastic. Is that a second demarcation? And another POP, MDF and MMP. So he's gone belt and braces to that. So it's all very good. I'm only picking this to make you all look sideways at the system. So we've got something here that came in from Frito. Beautiful piece of work. Okay, so we've got loading docks. We've got electricity room coming in. We've got a lift and an office. I might put the security screening, I might put next to the office. So we don't want to walk them through a data center. Data hall basically to get to that, but it's in the list. That's fantastic. The Inca did some great work here as well. With a generator yard outside, demarcation, IDF, meet me room, loading docks, data hall and server room. Yeah, it's all really good. People, I'm really impressed with the work that you've done. I'm basically clicking through them all, trying not to pick any favorites. But no matter how you drew it, I mean, there was a lovely one from, I can't remember who submitted this one. Oh, yeah, Victor. Victor basically ran out of ideas at the end. Well done. So he's got a generator yard with electric room, mechanical room. So it's electric and mechanical stuff. Next to the data hall, which is where we need it to be. Okay, it's near cooling and network rooms. Daniel Westmore looks like he's designed one before. He's done some fantastic drawing, Daniel. Pond for fishing. I like that on the bottom there. That's Daniel's there. He's got a pond for fishing there. He's got a generator yard, place for mechanical, staging areas. Didn't put HR and admin in. I think you might have gone a bit too far there, but well done. Right, so as you see, that was really designed just as a bit of fun to get us to look at and consider what we're basically putting in, where we are putting things in. I can see some of them are still coming through. Please. Giant inflatable giraffe room is the win. Well done. Yeah, and I thought I'd have a little stab at it as well because we all like to have a little look. I mean, mine started off quite sensible and then kind of ran out of areas, and I put data holes in a little bit. But as you see, it's all just about having a little bit of a think about where things are. Generator yard next to the electrical room, DEMARC next to the MDR, POP, MMR. So it's all just about a little bit of playing, isn't it? Anyone got any questions about that small little sample, that little run through that we did? Anyone have any particular problems or horribly confused or didn't quite get the idea? If not, remember, it's just a bit of fun, was it? So let's kind of move on to the last pieces. I'm going to see if I can get the Kahoot session in. We should manage that as well, so that will be good fun at the end. Only a couple of questions, but they're always entertaining, aren't they? So, basic characteristics. Okay, let's wrap up with literally the third lesson goal, which is a key into the considerations and insights of what we need for a data center. Data center flooring is normally raised by, how do I do this? 50 centimeters is roughly it. It's sort of a crawl space. Okay, no, you're not supposed to go crawling through it. Yes, you can crawl through it if you need basically to pass cables through. Okay, they are raising floors. So you can literally put one of these big sucker pads on them and you'll literally yank up a 50 centimeters by 50 centimeter square there and put it to one side and you can see the data cables that are lying under there. Once you've done your bit of work, you put it back on. These tend to be slab floors, I think is the way they call them. You can do these in your loft nowadays for insulation, but I don't think it's not quite the same, is it? Now, of course, the benefit of this is that looking at this picture, every single one of these slabs can be raised. Obviously, as soon as you start putting something on it, I think that's a desk leg there. So you start putting something on it, then it becomes a little bit trickier to raise. So what you tend to keep is you tend to keep clear paths through this. And indeed, your AC ones will simply have slots on the top, so they'll be grated. And these will go down the center of your cool aisles on your data center flooring. And they can be lifted and moved if you need to access things for the air conditioning. or they can be shifted around and the slots can be changed depending on how the air conditioning is working in that particular area. Remember, we said there are thermometers and temperature checks within your data center area. So if something is running a little bit cooler than it should be, you can probably just stick a solid one across the top of it, and that might well affect it just to keep that one a bit warmer and pushes the air to somewhere else where it needs a bit more cooling. So remember, we did our beautiful example there. The fundamental design of every data center is designed to incorporate your infrastructure. So remember, we make money from the racks. We don't make money from the air conditioning. That costs us money. We don't make money from putting electricity in it, but we need to have those things to run the data racks. So that's where we make money. So ideally, when you're designing a data center, you want to maximize that space for you to put in essentially financial and money-making materials or money-making gear. You should really consider about expansions. Now, a lot of data centers, and some of you do this in yours as well, separate rooms into a particular size. So there is an optimal size for a data center. There is an optimal size for a data center room. And the reason for that is if we only half fill that data center with equipment, that particular room with equipment, we are still pumping in air conditioning to keep that cool. So if we have a smaller room and we fill it to the top, that is then becomes an efficient room. So if we have multiple ones of those small rooms, yes, we can then control it and we can make it more and more efficient because we can shut off the rooms that do not have any equipment in. So we've got to remember we need to plan for expansion. So you may have 4, 5 data center hall rooms that you can basically use, and you may only be using 3 when you first open your data center. But as you expand, yes, you put more racks in to the other data center rooms, and then you'll put equipment in, and then you'll turn the air conditioning on for those areas. So remember, you've got to support the growth of your data center to cope with considering the changing demands of our customers. Any questions about the basic characteristics of what we have in the data center? Great, looking pretty good then. Oh, hold on, I can see someone, Patrick's typing. Well done, Patrick. The only thing I don't like about these images, this particular image. Oh, Patrick's got a very interesting question, Patrick. I'm going to come to that. Let me just finish what I was saying here. The only thing I don't like about these images is it doesn't show a hot aisle and a cold aisle. Okay, it doesn't show the data center racks basically being incorporated inside that, essentially a polytunnel, because every data center, every modern data center nowadays will always have that cold aisle through the middle. Patrick's question then, we'll come to that. Patrick's question says, I know we talked about blanking panels. Are there things such as blanking walls? No, I've never seen a data center with a set of sliding walls that basically lets you modulate it and shut it off. But remember, if you have a data center where you have aisles, data aisles with your racks in that are covered in essentially the polystyrene, to allow you to have a cold aisle and a hot aisle, a lot of air conditioning systems will allow you simply to blow air into one location rather than into 2. So if you have another aisle that is unused, you will be able to not blow air into that particular aisle. And that then makes your air conditioning more efficient. You're only cooling the stuff that needs cooling rather than stuff that's empty. They're not blanking walls. Danny Westmore says blanking walls are just vents. Now, they tend to be, I like what Patrick says, basically is saying, can we put in a wall straight in here that basically then blocks it off? If you're really fussy about it, Patrick, actually, you could happily build a partition that would simply keep them separate. But you should think about that before you build your air conditioning system into it, because moving the air conditioning is going to be a horrible nightmare. See several people typing, that's good. Yeah, it's a good question, Patrick. And I guess you'd end up weighing up the cost of creating those blanking walls against the cost of running the air conditioning for those rooms. I think if you talk to certain people, there is considered to be an optimal size for a data center. And I think Amazon struck on it. And I think I've heard a keynote speech, one of the guys literally stand up and says, we will not build a data center above a certain capacity. They would rather go somewhere else and build another data center rather than building a data center that is massive. They said there's an optimal capacity that they worked out. And that's all based around the money end of things. See Sunny typing there. Let's have a little look. Sunny, how can I build a better data center? I thought yours was kind of, if you have a look at what everyone else built and just have a consideration, then that might give you a good clue. When you can watch back the video, so we'll know which ones need to go where. I did show you an image of one that I built. But you've got to remember the data centers were pretty much what we fancied doing. Sunny, I was really impressed. Thank you very much for giving it a go. And there wasn't anything crazily wrong with yours other than the fact that it didn't contain all the rooms. But that's okay. We only give you 15 minutes for it. So it is only a bit of fun. But have a look at some of the other plans and some of the other ideas, and that might help you. Yeah, a couple of you typing now. I've gone a bit quick. We'll see if one of the teaching assistants can bring up a link to the optimal data center link speed or optimal data center layout. I haven't got one to hand, but it's something we could probably look at and see about supplying you. So, emergency consideration. These are things we always need to consider as part of our layout. Okay, while we can build in great access controls and prevent people getting in to the building, we've still always got to make sure that people can get out. So we've got to make sure we have proper signage throughout the building for fire extinguishers, possible hazards, and emergency exits. Remember when we talked about the hazardous materials in our data centers? Yes, those rooms must be labeled 100% clearly. So when you go into something that's got a UPS system that's got tons and tons of batteries, that room must be clearly labeled. And again, our access control can look for that. But we should also make sure we clearly label our exits. Any questions about emergency consideration? Sometimes you also have to consider things such as how would fire engines, fire trucks, or whatever it is you call them in America, fire engines would get to that particular location. So they've got to have access to the relevant materials as well. Stephen's got a good question there. How would the emergency exits work well on a multi-floor high security building? But remember, all the security exits are normally alarmed. So there is normally an alarm that basically then goes down an external staircase, isn't it? All buildings above a certain number of floors need to have external staircases. You're not allowed to fly out now. But again, these fire regulations do depend on which country you're basically building. Okay, so you've also got to consider that final part is where you build it. So we've got to have environmental consideration. Okay. More and more renewable energy is basically being used in data centers. Why would we not use free energy? So we need to consider whether or not we can build it near wind turbine areas, or whether or not we can build it where we get a lot of solar energy created. And again, we have to consider, the heat factors and our air conditioning and the needs to keep things cool to help reduce our cost and essentially make less of an impact on the climate that we're talking about. Data centers usage are growing and growing and growing. So we need to bear in mind that. There's a little discussion question there. How do environmental considerations such as the use of renewable energy sources like solar and wind power impact the design and operations of data centers? I think we've asked this one before, haven't we? And while you're considering that, if you happen to think of things, I have just poked into the live chat a Kahoot link. So Patrick was answering the question that I've originally posed there, which was HVAC designs need to be built around the weather and temperature. So you're expecting in a given area. So yes, you've got to be aware your HVAC systems need to consider, are you in a cold climate, a warm climate? And then you've got to design them based around those items.